So the panel went away, they looked at all the evidence, including Rat Park and all the stuff I'm talking about, and they came back and they said, decriminalise all drugs, the whole lot, everything. But, and this is the crucial next step, take all the money we currently spend on fucking up the lives of drug users and addicts, on shaming them, stigmatising them, punishing them, and spend all that money instead on turning their lives around. My name's Johann. I'm the author of the book Chasing the Scream, the first and last days of the war on drugs. I'm here with Funzing in London. I'm going to be talking about how the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, the opposite of addiction is connection. I learned a lot when I went on a long journey into the world of addiction. I went to lots of different countries. One of the facts that most surprised me is what happened in Portugal. They had a huge drug problem. 1% of the population was addicted to heroin. They decided to do something really radical. They decriminalised all drugs and they transferred all the money they used to spend on screwing up the lives of people with addiction to turning their lives around. The result was that injecting drug use fell by 50%, overdose massively fell, HIV transmission massively fell, almost nobody wants to go back. Addiction is not what you think it is. The reason I want to talk about addiction here in Britain is that we're in the middle of a massive crisis that we're not talking about. For the latest year for which we have figures, 2016, 3,200 people died of addiction-related causes. That's significantly more people than died on September 11th, 2001. I've been to countries where they've reduced those deaths to almost zero. There are 3,000 of our fellow citizens who should be in this room now, and they're not because we're not treating them right. And all forms of addiction in Britain have been significantly rising throughout my lifetime, and significant, and even more since 2008. Gambling addiction. I don't need to talk to anyone here about smartphone addiction. I can give you loads of the statistics if you want, but you know it in your bones. You can't go anywhere without people obsessively twitching to look at their phones. The average British person touches their phone more than 2,000 times a day. So I want to talk about these different forms of addiction and why this is happening to us and what we can do about it. I realised we were coming up to 100 years since drugs were first banned in Britain and the United States, we then imposed it on the rest of the world. And I really wanted to understand, all sorts of things. Why did we go to war against drug addicts 100 years ago? Why are we carrying on when it doesn't seem to work? What are the alternatives? Is anyone doing it right? What's really going on here? And so I ended up going to loads of different countries, from the places that have been most brutal towards people with addiction problems. In Arizona, I went out on a chain gang with women who were made to wear t-shirts saying, "I was a drug addict," while members of the public mock them and jeer at them. I went to Vietnam, where they put drug addicts in gulags and make them do forced labour. And I went to the places where they have the most compassionate possible drug policies. There were loads of things that surprised me on this journey, but the thing that most surprised me is, in a way, the most basic question of all, which is what causes addiction. If you'd asked me at the start of this journey, what causes, for example, heroin addiction, I would have looked at you like you're an idiot. I would have said, well, the clue's in the name, stupid. It's called heroin addiction. Heroin addiction is caused by heroin. We've been told this story for 100 years that's become totally part of our common sense, right? We think if we took the first 20 people on this first two rows here, and we forcibly injected you all with heroin every day for a month, at the end of that, you'd all be heroin addicts. For a simple, some of you look a bit enthusiastic about that. For a simple reason, there are chemical hooks in heroin that your body would start to physically need. But in the 70s, Professor Alexander, who'd been working with people with addiction problems, came along and said, well, hang on a minute. You put the rat alone in an empty cage where it's got nothing to do except use this drug. What would happen if we did this differently? So he built a cage that he called Rat Park, which is basically like paradise for rats. They've got loads of cheese, they've got loads of friends, they can have loads of sex, they've got loads of tunnels to run around in, everything rats like. And they've got both the water bottles, the normal water and the drugged water. But this is the fascinating thing. In Rat Park, they don't like the drugged water. They almost never use it. None of them ever use it compulsively. None of them overdose. So you go from 100% compulsive use and overdose when their lives are shit and they're deprived of the things that give rats meaning, to almost to very little extreme use and no overdose when they're given the things that make life meaningful. There's lots of human examples about this. I'll give you just one. There was an experiment happening at the same time as Rat Park. Human experiment, you might have heard of it, it was called the Vietnam War. Now, if you believe this old way of thinking about addiction, that makes absolutely no sense. They've been exposed to all the chemical hooks that you can be exposed to. If you understand Bruce Alexander's way of thinking, it makes perfect sense. If any of us were taken and put in a horrific pestilential jungle where you don't want to be and you're forced to kill people and you could die at any moment, I guarantee you'd find heroin a lot more appealing than it is now to you. And when you came home to your life, if your life is full of meaning, purpose and connection, it's going to be relatively easy for you to leave that behind. So one of the things I concluded from this, and it's the line that I kind of I feel like I've become like a weird catchphrase person, but the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, the opposite of addiction is connection.
Hey guys, we hope you liked that clip. We're just here after the talk with Johann, the author of Chasing the Scream, and we have one audience question that we'd like to ask him. If you want to ask your own questions, get a ticket and come for the discussion. So our question today is, why should Britain care about addiction?
Well, we're in the middle of the biggest addiction crisis in modern British history.
Mm-hmm.
More than 3,000 people died in the last year for which we've got statistics, 2016.
Wow.
That's more people than died on 9/11.
Wow.
And I've been to loads of different countries to see how they deal with addiction crises. And if we responded like Portugal, where they decriminalised all drugs and transferred all the money they used to spend on screwing people's lives up when they've got addiction problems to turning their lives around, we could have massively reduced those addiction problems. In Switzerland, where they legalised heroin and focused the money on actually helping people with addiction problems, they have reduced overdose deaths on the legal program to 0. Wow. Nobody has died on legal heroin in Switzerland in more than 10 years. You compare it to here, where more people have died than died in 9/11 because of addiction problems.
Okay guys, so like we said, to bring your own questions, please go to funzing.co.uk and we'll see you at the next show.
Yeah, it was really good. I really enjoyed the event. He was clearly an incredible speaker, very, very well rehearsed and really knew his stuff. Definitely come back again.
We both really enjoyed the show tonight, and it was a really compelling talk about a very serious problem, and ultimately what was at stake, and there was an excellent diagnosis here of a really endemic problem which affects lots of people. And what was discussed tonight, and this should be at the crux of all debates on addiction, is what is the prescription. We recognise that there's a serious problem and what is to be done. And it was a really compelling narrative, and we enjoyed it.
What he was saying was, it was really good. We got a chance to ask questions. There was a problem pointed out, and there was some of the solution was offered as well. And for an uncle and a nephew to come to this sort of talk and be able to ask questions of the author himself, it was really good.
That's good. Thank you.
So thank you, Johann.